Hi, today is another great question episode, and we're looking deeply into one specific question. That is, what is your recommendation? Sounds simple, but you'll be surprised about the depth and what you can achieve with it. Stay tuned.
This is the Coaching Leader Podcast, a resource for modern, busy people leaders like you who know that just directing people simply does not work in the long run. We provide focused skill practice and the relevant thinking models, so you will ask better questions and make your team shine. Freshly served to you by IntelliCoach.org from hot and spicy Singapore.
Hello and a warm welcome again to the Coaching Leader Podcast. So this is Mike, and today's episode, as I said, will be another great questions episode. And in these, we will look at one specific question. We'll go vertically very deep. We'll pick up one question and see when could we use it as a leader in our work? What might be the impact? What might be the good use? And today's question is, what is your recommendation? Sounds like common sense. What's the big deal about that, Mike? What's the big deal about that simple question? I will tell you. Now, I'm all for experimenting, and I'm gonna switch up the structure of the podcast a little bit, because I want to not just give you a recommendation of some sort, but I want to give you and also myself the benefit of a balanced view. So something I'll use today is the concept of the 6 thinking hats by Edward De Bono. And many of you will know them, some of you might not, but by listening to this podcast, you will get to know them. So Edward De Bono introduced the 6 thinking hats as a way to sort of look through different angles at a thing to be discussed, a decision, for example. And there are different colored hats which represent different angles to a discussion. I will introduce them as I go, but I feel that might be useful for us to just make sure we talk about all the related elements to it. The first hat is the white hat. We put that hat on when we talk about neutral facts, data, information. The question we discussed today is, what is your recommendation? So when do we use that? So in a very factual way, we use that when a team member approaches us. Maybe they walk up to you, they text you on your office communicator, and they ask you a question. Hey boss, I have this challenge. What do you think we could do? What do you think I should do? What do you think is the right way forward? And in that moment, instead of right away saying your opinion and the solution that definitely has already popped up in your head, you will take a moment and you will say, okay, I have something in mind, but what is your recommendation? And that's already it. That's the facts. And that is when we use that question. So we use it to ignite some thinking in the other person. Now let's take that white hat off and put on our yellow hat. And the yellow hat is about brightness, optimism. And I use that to sort of describe the value of that question. I've used that question first when I've been really experimenting with my team years ago, and I've been wondering what can I do to sort of improve the way we interact on a day-to-day basis. My team had to decide. That was their job. They had to decide yes or no on the basis of business requests. Should they approve or not? And they would approach me very often and ask me, what do you think, Mike? What should we do? In this case, it's tricky. And I would often just say my opinion first. And that was a normal way of doing. But I started experimenting with this particular question. What is your recommendation? And the value that it had is, it was a bit like magic. For me, it helped me because it gave me a bit of a time for a breather to think. And it helped them to think for themselves. A bit of magic unfolds here because in the beginning, people wouldn't expect that question, and they were a bit taken aback by it, wondering because they realized I didn't have any recommendation at this moment. They came forward to me, they asked me a question, my opinion on a challenge, but they themselves had not yet taken a stand, not yet taken a position. And that is really interesting because with that question, you are giving them the opportunity to form their own opinion. Now that can be painful a bit in that moment, but if we do this consistently with all team members and over time, a second level magic will unfold, which is twofold in my view. Better ideas and saved time. So better ideas is because when you know, for example, you need to approach your boss on something, on a decision to make. For example, I have these 2 candidates to hire. I don't know which one to choose. Based on all these given facts, boss, who would you choose? But in that moment, maybe you haven't made your decision yet. If you thought ahead before approaching your boss, because you know your boss will ask you, what do you recommend? So you have to make a decision before you walk up to your boss. And that changes things because you will think the decision through in a very different way. Because suddenly, frankly, your bum is on the line, isn't it? Because you will show a little bit of vulnerability. In the long run, this creates simply better ideas. Because very often, what I realized when I did this, and what my team members told me afterwards, is that they might refine their thinking further before they even approached me. And what that means is time saving. Because a couple of the things that your team members might bring to you, they might not even bring to you anymore after they thought about them for a moment. After they thought about a decision they would make, they realize, it doesn't make sense, let me go back to square one. Or they realize, this is so clear-cut, I don't actually have to involve her or involve him. I might just send an email to inform. So this can really turn into a time saving because very often in our day-to-day rush, we might simply forget to think things through a little bit more. So the yellow hat, the value of doing this can be the extraction of better ideas and to save time for you as a leader. And also for them, for the people who think through. Because very often we might engage in a discussion that is unnecessary. Because just a few seconds of thinking ahead, what your position might be, can really be helpful. And I think a last benefit I want to mention here is it's confidence and also trust. Because when we learn that we have to go out and share our own opinion, and we do that regularly, it trains us. And it's something that we can learn to become more comfortable in. It's sort of one of the best clandestine, I would say, leadership trainings you can do with your own team members. Even if they are not in any leadership position yet. Asking them the simple question, what do you recommend, is an amazing kind of way for you to understand what's going on in the heads of your team members. How willing and eager are they to go out there and share what their views are? I also mentioned trust because this question really shows how you value their opinion. It's a wonderful way to sort of, in quotes, push down the thinking, but do it in a way that can be very respectful. Now, this was the yellow hat about brightness and optimism. Let's move on to the black hat. So that's where I'll play my own devil's advocate. Why might it not work? And there could be many reasons why this question could backfire, right? I mean, the very obvious one is not every situation makes this question appropriate. If a team member approaches you and they ask you a knowledge question, for example, they ask you, what is the KPI to focus on in this area? And you know exactly the answer in that moment. But you ask back, okay, well, what's your recommendation? That exactly is a perfect way to destroy trust. Because in that moment, when you do that, when you have the right answer, the absolutely right answer, it's a knowledge piece, not a real decision piece, I would say. Then you, act more in a way of passive aggressiveness. And people will know that. They will see how you come across maybe as smug in that moment. And you hold back something which makes them stay on their toes. That is not a trust builder. This question would not be used if there is a black or white answer. But fortunately for us, or unfortunately, depending how you see it, most of the things we have to decide day by day are not black and white, but they are gray. There are pros and cons to many possible choices we could make. Be very clear that you don't use that when there is a very clear answer. Then it might not make sense. Then maybe you step out of the coaching mindset and advise and share with them what you think. Then the other thing is, if you have really low trust with an employee, with a team member of yours, you have to be very careful how you bring this question across. Now we know, and I've shared it before, that a coaching mindset and a coaching approach requires a certain degree of trust, but it can also build trust. But when we start from a position of low trust, that means we're on bad terms with somebody and we're protective, this question might backfire. Why? Because the employee who hears you ask, what is your recommendation, will view that question in the light of what they expect from you, which is something with an agenda. So we have to be very careful how our body language is in sync. And it comes back to the coaching mindset again. Can I ask this question with the mindset of, I really believe that the person in front of me can recommend something valuable and that they have the capacity to do this. But if you ask this with low trust and you just ask it to throw back the question, just let the other person think. If you have this kind of thinking in your head, it will not work. Because then the other person will probably shield themselves and protect themselves for good reason. Because you just, with your body language, showed them that they should do that. We are all very astute in recognizing that in someone. Is the person in front of me who asked that question really on my side? Is this person partnering with me, or are they trying to throw me under the bus? Because if somebody who you have low trust with and they hear this question, what is your recommendation? They might simply think you're cheap and you might just hop on their idea next. And you might just protect yourself by not sharing your opinion. So it's a very different dynamic. It simply won't work if you don't have a genuine interest in your team member's opinion and in, frankly, the actual recommendation. It makes sense, doesn't it? They will feel it. If you ask this question just as something to carry over 2 to 3 minutes and satisfy the coaching tick box, but right after their recommendation, you say, I don't think so. Let me say, this is what I would do. Without engaging with their answer, it's better to not ask it. Because in that moment, you destroy more than you create. So it's very important in that first moment when you try this question out, that you remain neutral, that you use the coaching skill of sharing your observation on what the team member said without judgment. Because if you ask that question, what is your recommendation, and they come back with something you don't agree with, and already while they talk, you frown and they feel your nervousness in sharing your disagreement, that will probably be the last time they will take a risk here and share their actual view with you. So it's very important that you take their recommendation seriously, especially if in that moment they have not yet thought it through. So, and the key thing is here to respond to their recommendation again with curiosity. We're saying, what made you say that? What would make that recommendation really bulletproof? What could go wrong in your view? I'm curious. So if you stay in that mindset, you are on a rapid rapid way to build more trust and to get better ideas from your team members. It's also a bit negative, still on the black hat here, because it makes them a bit vulnerable. So, and you might feel that some of your team members might not bring any more questions or ideas to you. But again, this is directly influenced by the way you respond to the answer they give you. Their vulnerability, their ability to step out of their comfort zone is directly related to how safe you make them feel to share their views. Because simply walking up to you and saying, "What do you think?" is easy. But walking up to you and saying, "This is the situation that I have. This is the decision I have to make, and this is my recommendation, boss. What do you think?" It's a very different ballgame. And nobody wants to be shut down when they come out and say, and they don't want to feel stupid. They want to be valued for their opinion. So judgment is a very important point here, right? Let's play this through for a moment. So let's say the idea that comes back from your team member is a good idea. And you agree in that moment. You simply say, "Very well." And then you switch on your curiosity and you ask, so how would you know that it works? Or what could possibly get in your way? What could go possibly wrong? Where might you need help? You could also make a judgment in that moment that you add some more detail to reaffirm your value and add something to the idea of the other person. That is fine. Just be aware that the more you add, the more you might take away ownership from them. So the question again that I usually would ask in many times is, what could possibly go wrong if we take that route? What alternatives are there? What again would speak against the other option? And if it's a bad idea, don't right away shut it down. This is where we also have to control ourselves, because especially when we are busy, we have a long day and a bit of decision fatigue kicks in, our whole body language might share very quickly how disapproving we are of their opinion. So in that case, share with them what you think, but take a partnering and equal position. That always conveys, "I'm on your side. I understand why you chose this way. Here's my view. And I wonder what you think." So the tone makes the music, and the intent makes the difference. So the more you come across as partnering in that moment, the more you retain the trust, and the more you have a chance that your team member will continue giving you their honest recommendations. They might also say, black hat still, they might also say, "I have no idea. Why do you ask for my recommendation? I have no idea. That's why I actually came to you." What would you say to that, huh? In that case, yes, you might just switch to saying what your thoughts are. And you say to yourself, this person will learn that I will always ask this question. Or you could, and that's what I would suggest, just ask at least one more question to understand where their thinking is currently. So for example, you could ask, what options have you considered so far? What is on the table for you? What is most likely to succeed? Because frankly, and that's what I would do always, add a little bit of humility. Because I'm not the expert in this particular topic here. Based on what you know, where would you start exploring? So there are many ways how you can sort of gently nudge your people to think more before they approach you. And that consistency will help tremendously. So that was our black hat. So in summary, the scenario matters. Low trust is important, because if there's low trust, it won't work that well. It also won't work if you don't have a genuine interest in your team members' opinions. It might make their position more vulnerable. And you might argue some of the more reserved people will hold their opinions back or not bring challenges to you. But again, that's directly related to how judgmental you are, to how judgmental you come across in the moment when they first tip their toes slightly outside their comfort zone. And see what happens if they actually share their opinion in a vulnerable way. Let's put on a different hat now. So we talked about the white hat, which was just information. Then we talked about the yellow hat, which was about bright spots and the value. We talked about the black hat. But what could go wrong? Let's talk about the green hat. So green hat is about alternatives, possibilities, some new ideas. I'll make this quite short. Some alternative ways how you could ask this, for example, would be based on the information that you have. Where would you land first? You could also take a very different route, for example, and say, if you were me, what would you recommend? What would you say? And that might not work in all instances, but this is your good judgment where you can use it. Another really interesting related way is, and that's something I picked up from a really wonderful book by David Marquet, which is called Turn the Ship Around. It's written by a Navy submarine captain who was able to, through his leadership style of empowerment, help to really make a drastic change in the way a submarine operated. And one thing he did was to train his people to always approach him, not with a question, but with an intent. For example, he would ask them, so what is your intent? What do you intend to do? And they would learn to say, Captain, I intend to take the ship down 400 yards. And that moment he would decide and might just answer very well. Or he might decide to dig a little bit deeper and say, so where are we in terms of preparation steps for this? If he has some questions. But in the end, he trained his people to think things through and to approach him with an intent. And I find it a very smart alternative way to achieve a similar impact. And think of it, it could be the same way. The example that we had earlier about just hiring. If you approach your boss and say, boss, I intend to hire this person. And that springs from a decision I made out of a pool of 3 people. I would love to share with you my rationale and see whether you think I might have missed something. That's a very different way of an empowering conversation with a leader, isn't it? And your role as a leader is very important here in helping people feel safe, not vulnerable, in the moment when they do this. So, the red hat is about feelings, likes, dislikes, fear, without a bit of an intention to judge those feelings, right? And here I really share my very own view about the question about what I bring in here. And I've got to say, having my red hat firmly on, that I really, really like this question because it is so empowering. And if it comes across, for example, with strong body language, imagine, for example, your team member walks up to you at your desk, you're sitting there typing away an email, and they come to you and they ask you, sorry, do you have a moment to talk? So I have a decision to make in terms of the dismissal of this person. I would really love to know your opinion. And in that moment, if you take your hands away from the keyboard and your entire body moves towards the other person, you turn that chair and you show that you are really with the person, and then you ask them, all right, I know this has been on your mind for a while, hasn't it? So it sounds like you've come closer to a decision. So what do you recommend? So if this comes across in a way that is partnering, and your body language and your words are in sync, and they show curiosity and real interest in their opinion, you save time and you build trust. That's the magic of it. So it's really powerful, and it's an empowering reversal of roles. It trains leadership. It shows appreciation towards the opinions of others. Yeah, so I'm wearing a bit of a red hat and yellow hat right now. I think one thing that also jumped out for me is that I really personally don't like that old saying, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions instead. That sounds very harsh. I would love to replace that with a recommendation. Come to me with a supported recommendation, which is in my view not the same. Because don't come to me with problems, come with solutions means people, if they don't have a solution, they won't come to you. And you might not get visibility of a lot of problems that might be brewing. We can't expect our team members to solve everything by themselves. We still have a role to play here. But what we can expect from our team members is that they take a position on the challenge that they're facing. And out of the range of possible ideas or possible solutions, that they formed a firm opinion on what they would recommend. And this also, maybe that's another yellowhead moment here. I think this also gives you as a leader really valuable data on performance, on their thinking. Because every time someone comes up to you and they share a choice, a decision they have to make, and you take note of their way of thinking and how sound their judgment was, it gives you a lot of clues about their ability to lead. So, as a last moment, I'm taking that red hat off and I will wear the blue hat. And the blue hat sort of symbolizes authority, discipline, feeling calm and cool, leading the session. It's more, in Edward De Bono's words, it's more about making sure that we follow the principles of these 6 thinking hats. I'm going to use the blue hat to send you off with an action item, as usual. So what can you do? So when a team member asks you the next time about something, take that moment again to think, take 1 or 2 deep breaths, and then switch on your coaching mindset and be curious about where they have landed so far on that same topic. Maybe they are afraid to share their views. Maybe it's something that has a lot of, potential to blow up for whatever reason. But what you can always expect is that your team members come to you with a recommendation, however incomplete their information is, because that's what we all have to deal with, isn't it? I have one question to you. I actually have 2 questions to you as usual that I would like you to think about right here, right there. And so as a leader, and by the way, this doesn't have to apply only as a leader, right? So people might come to you all the time, because if you are a functional guru and you're known for your expertise, maybe you can use that technique every now and then to understand more about other people. Because don't forget it, and that's another yellowhead moment. People love to share advice. And that's another way to ask, what would you advise? But we ask it in a way of recommendation. So as a leader, imagine your team members, picture them, all of them, your entire team. Doesn't matter if it's 1, 3, 5, 10, hopefully not more, because that's a difficult span of control to manage. Imagine your team members in front of you. And pick one person who you could try this with. The next time they approach you in whatever communication means, how could you try this? Can you visualize that moment when they walk up to you? What would you do? And I will give you again 30 seconds to think this through. Yeah, so I hope you have a starting point with one of your team members who you could try this with. Maybe you even feel comfortable to try this across the board, because nothing beats consistency, isn't it? Consistency on 2 dimensions, consistency with all your team members and consistency over time. Because the more you show this pattern of behavior, the more people will learn that they can always expect that question. And people want to feel prepared in most times. The second question I want to ask you is, what could possibly hold you back? What could get in your way of really asking this question? What's your recommendation? I'll give you another 30 seconds. All right. So with that, we have reached the end of this great question episode. I feel personally that this is a very powerful way to engage your team members. There's a lot of value in this one question. There are some dangers too. So I hope the black hat section of this episode was useful to you. So now all you have to do is give it a shot. And give it a shot with the best coaching mindset that you can pull off. I look forward to hearing from you and see what happens. All the best and talk to you soon.
You have been listening to the Coaching Leader Podcast, your resource to activate strengths and coaching skills in leaders. Head over to IntelliCoach.org to check out our blog and offers. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you for tuning in.
Hello and welcome back to the extended part of this podcast, where I'm continuing to ramble on a little bit more on a meta level or some other things that are going on and that are on top of mind for me, aside from the actual podcast content. Talking about the episode itself that you just heard, I observed with myself that this thing was much easier to record, and I'm trying to figure out why now. Now there are a few variables that are in play here, and I can only suspect. I drank a big glass of water right away before it. I did the podcast the first thing in the morning, so I did it when it was the first, when I'm in a very good rested place. I also find, and that just comes back to mind for me, that the structure that I gave it, those 6 thinking hats, really helped me. Going through this content in a way that I found very useful. Now I don't know how that comes across to you as a listener, whether that helps. But I found for me that allowed me to have a structure there and not prepare all the detail. So this experiment really worked out for me, and that's fascinating. I love experimenting for that exact reason. I don't know why exactly I came across Edward De Bono's ideas on the 6 thinking hats recently, but it is such a useful way to make sure we look at multiple angles of the same situation, decision, or choice. I can seriously say, red hat again, that this question made a huge impact in my own effectiveness as a leader, and in the way how I helped to groom my own team members to show up more ownership of their work and their decisions. I would really love you to try this and give this a shot. The next thing I want to talk about is my one big thing this week. And just let me pull up my Evernote here. I just want to check. What did I have in there? So my last week, the one big thing that I shared with you I'm working on is building the ebook shell. And I'm happy to say that I gave this thing a success rate of 90%. Yeah. That means I've got that shell done, and I'm especially proud of that because I was able to stay away from perfectionism. And that's so hard. I find very hard to build something and not perfect it right away. So building that shell was very useful, and staying at that low level of prototype quality is very useful. Because as you know, if you got it perfect, you spend a lot of time. If you have something fundamental to change, you have to throw a lot of time away that you have already done, time and effort. So I find it really useful to apply that MVP, minimal viable product thinking here. So I give myself a rating of 90%, and that's really outstanding for me. So for this week, my goal is a bit different. My one big thing, it's still about the ebook. And by the way, it doesn't mean that I only work on one thing. I mean, there are deliverables here that I just have to do, and that's executing work. I always like to differentiate between maker and manager. So when I'm a manager in that moment, I use it to describe simply executing things that are on my calendar. Client delivery work. For example, I have two team coaching workshops in my calendar today. I don't have to put them on my one big thing list. I know I will do that. I can figure these out and I will do them. I know that. I don't need a reminder. I don't need a special way to ensure that focus, put it this way. Yeah, so this one thing is not about executing work, like delivering workshops, running coaching sessions, and so forth. It is about ensuring that I do the things that in the Eisenhower matrix are not urgent but very important. And that ebook is squarely in that area. And this is where the maker comes in. When I make things, like I feel this podcast right now, which is, nobody gives me a deadline, but I love doing it. And because it's a wonderful way that I found for myself to unleash some of the content and ideas and bring it to people like you. I need to put myself into the maker state very regularly, and this is where I will use the one thing thinking. And this week it's again about the ebook and in a different fashion. So I want to build 1 page a day in the ebook in a sort of MVP style. Absolutely dirty, minimal, viable product style. So just get content out and stay away from perfecting. And it is strange now. I'm, how old am I now? 38? Yes, 38. And it feels strange that I only now get the grasp of this kind of thinking. I felt very comfortable in perfecting things and finding the time to do that, even sometimes at the cost of family. But there are better ways, and a whole new world opens up for me right now in that. And another example for that was yesterday. I bought the course by Laura Elizabeth, Design Fundamentals, and I'm blown away by it, by its way of delivering on some ideas that I really value. So I bought this course because I want to spend more time or some very focused effort in making my webpage, IntelliCoach webpage, ready to go live. So it's not as important, but I wanted to showcase what kind of value I want to bring to you, to leaders, to executives out there, because I really believe that coaching can help. Applying a bit of the mindset and some of the skills can make a huge impact in the organizations out there. But for that, I need to be able to convey that somehow, and the webpage is just one way of doing it. And I bought this course, this Design Fundamentals course, and before even designing, you have to get your content out. And I had a big light bulb moment on that yesterday. One of the first lessons that Laura mentioned in there was, getting your content ready. And she proposes not to draft your content in the browser. She proposes to just pull up a Google Docs document and just write it out like a story and stay on that level there. And the other tip is, don't design whatever then comes next right in the browser. Use some kind of prototyping tool. And I've been experimenting yesterday with Adobe's XD, and it allows you to simply throw together a web page mock-up without having to deal with any of the side effects of all these authoring tools on the web. Now I'm using a quite sophisticated web page building tool, but even it's not really doesn't really allow me to freely move things around as fast as my mind would want to. And I had this light bulb moment after using XD for an hour that this is so extremely useful in helping me focus on the content first. So this is part of the experiment that I'm doing right now, because I've been drafting my current webpage right in the browser. And I did something yesterday. I just copied out the words and the content and put it in a mind map. I put it in a document and tried to read it, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. There's no storyline there. And I really appreciate that idea of pulling things together just in a document. Reminds me of a previous mentor of mine, my previous boss, who really opened my eyes how to make a powerful PowerPoint presentation in the organization. Had to put together a deck of 10, 12 slides for a presentation, and he told me, just take a piece of paper, write the headlines of each slide, and make them a story that they connect. There should be statements, something that connect. So you have these 12, 13 statements. And if they don't make sense, you have to redo it. You have to work until that makes sense. And only once you have that storyline, then you start thinking about how could I visualize that statement. And I found this extremely useful because the mere fact of staying on paper is allowing you to think freely. And I've been trying that yesterday. I've been starting doing that with the mind map tool. It's sort of the same thing. It's completely without design. It's just relying on content. And it's quite eye-opening. That's my second thing. Yeah, so I want to get the curve now to the ebook MVP. Yeah, I want to stay very high level at this moment. And Laura Elizabeth's course helped me. And the moment I'm done with my 1 page a day ebook MVP, which I hope to do every day within less than 30 minutes to 1 hour, I will spend a bit of time to just work on the content of the webpage on paper. On, maybe not paper, but on a document. And I find this a very interesting experience that I want to carry forward into many different areas. Because then the eventual design will be much better if people have drafted on paper beforehand, and if they have prototyped, and if they have designed first in a little sketching tool like Adobe XD or SketchUp on Mac or whatever there is. Or maybe even on paper, who knows, or whiteboard. And I've experimented with that yesterday, and I see the value and I believe in it. So that's really powerful. Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to mention here, just some stats. So right now, you're still a very exclusive small crowd listening to this. I think last week I did a tiny little experiment by writing a blog post on IntelliCoach.org and then sharing that blog post, not rewriting it, sharing it on LinkedIn. Gave me about 400 views, not much. But I produced a little bit of feedback. Or not feedback, I produced a little bit of page views on IntelliCoach.org. So very early, very tiny experiment, but I can see the value of now starting to reach out. Hope this rambling was not too far off from what you expected. And if, you can always feel free to stop listening after the main episode. If you have any questions though, I think just go on IntelliCoach.org and click the little speech bubble to get in contact with me. So on the bottom right, there's a little speech bubble. It will only take you a few seconds. You can just click that thing and just write whatever comes to mind for you. If you have any question, any remarks, anything you like, anything you don't like, I'd be really happy to hear from one of you very early listeners, because I think it's just a handful and you're very special to me. So thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.